You gave me nothing but stress. If you die tomorrow, I wouldn't even blink. That's what my son said to me, cold, calm. Like I was an item he regretted owning, like I had somehow expired. He didn't yell, he didn't even look up. He just tossed those words into the air and let them land like a knife. My name is Nora. I'm 69 years old, a widow, a mother, a woman who spent the better part of her life serving one person, her child, my son, Liam. After my husband passed away, I poured everything I had into raising Liam. I scrubbed floors during the day, folded laundry at night. I sold my wedding ring to help pay for his college textbooks. I skipped dinners so he could eat better. I didn't complain, not once. I thought love was enough. I thought sacrifice was seen. I thought motherhood meant being remembered. But slowly, I became invisible. Now I live in the house I helped him buy. He says it's his house, but half of it was paid with my husband's life insurance. I don't argue. I cook in silence. I keep my shoes by the door, quietly. I sleep in the smallest room, surrounded by boxes he never bothers to unpack. Lately, he's been different, distant, like I'm something stuck to his shoe. He listens to these online mentors who preach about cutting off toxic mothers and reclaiming masculine energy, and now I'm no longer his mother. I'm a problem to solve, a drain on his potential. It was last Friday when I noticed the charge, $400 from my credit card. I asked him about it, softly, gently. I wasn't angry, just confused. That's when he said it. You gave me nothing but stress. If you die tomorrow, I wouldn't even blink. Then he turned his back and walked out of the kitchen. The faucet was still running, my hands were still wet. But I felt frozen, like I had turned into a piece of old furniture, still here, but no longer needed. I stood there for a long time. I couldn't cry, not yet. I was too stunned to feel. That night, in the tiny guest room where I sleep, I stared at the ceiling. Next to me was a picture frame, Liam at age 9, wearing a paper crown I made from cereal boxes. I remember cutting it at midnight after a long shift, just to see him smile. He used to call me his queen. Now my death wouldn't even cause him to flinch. That was the moment something broke inside me. But maybe something else quietly began. I didn't sleep that night. After Liam said those words I can't forget, I just sat in the dark, listening to the quiet hum of a house I no longer felt part of. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't move for hours. I stared at the shadows on the ceiling, wondering how I had ended up like this. How did I become invisible in the very life I created? Over the years, Liam had stopped being the boy who once hugged my legs in public and cried when I left for work. Now he walked past me without a glance. Now he left his dishes for me to clean and his messes for me to hide. He spent most of his time watching these self-proclaimed men's coaches online. Their messages were the same: cut off weak people. Parents are just emotional parasites. If your mother didn't give you power, she doesn't deserve space in your life. And Liam believed them. He started using those words casually around the house. He said I was draining his energy, that I held him back, all because I asked him to take out the trash, or reminded him of the rent I helped him cover. He stopped working months ago, said he was building a business, but all I saw was a man hiding behind headphones and excuses, asking me for more temporary help that never ended, and I gave it because I loved him, because I thought this was what mothers do. Until that $400 charge. I found it on my statement, another online course, another fantasy he couldn't afford. I asked him about it, gently, without accusation. That's when he looked at me, really looked at me, and said, "You gave me nothing but stress. If you die tomorrow, I wouldn't even blink." He walked out before I could speak. Not that I would have known what to say. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight, like the air had thickened. But no tears came. There was nothing left to release. Because the truth is, I had already died in this house. Not physically, emotionally, spiritually. Bit by bit, piece by piece, every time I was ignored, dismissed, or labeled a burden. I sat on the edge of my narrow bed in the tiny guest room I called mine. I looked at the framed photo of Liam as a child, grinning with missing teeth, hugging me tight with crayon-stained fingers. I used to believe that little boy would grow up to protect me. Instead, he grew into a man who erased me. And for the first time, I asked myself something terrifying. If I left tomorrow, would anyone even come looking? The next morning, I woke up, but I didn't move. I lay there in the narrow guest bed, listening to the house breathe around me, a house I helped pay for, that now felt as foreign as a hotel room. The words from the night before echoed like a slow, cruel drumbeat. If you die tomorrow, I wouldn't even blink. At first, my brain tried to soften them. He was tired, he didn't mean it. It was just a bad moment. But my heart knew better. That wasn't a mistake. It was a confession. I sat up slowly, not because I had somewhere to be, but because my body ached from years of bending, shrinking, adjusting. Not from age, but from a lifetime of making myself small so others could feel big. I looked around my room, a suitcase in the corner I never unpacked fully. The old photo of Liam at age 7, missing teeth, arms around my neck, eyes that once looked at me like I was his whole world. Now he looked through me like I was clutter. I pulled out the box I'd been hiding for years, full of little things I couldn't throw away. A drawing that said, "Mommy is my sunshine." A thank you note he scribbled in 3rd grade. His hospital bracelet from when he broke his arm and clung to me like a lifeline. How did we get here? I replayed every sacrifice I made, quietly without asking for thanks. Working 2 jobs when he wanted new soccer cleats, selling my necklace to cover his first semester of college, skipping my own doctor appointments because he needed gas money. I gave without keeping score. But now I couldn't help but ask, did any of it matter? Had I given so much that I erased myself completely? I used to believe motherhood was about pouring everything into your child. But no one tells you what to do when the cup comes back empty. When your child grows up and sees your love not as a gift, but as an obligation they never asked for. I didn't know whether to feel anger or shame. Anger for being treated like I didn't matter. Shame for allowing it to go on for so long. I had taught him, through my silence, that it was okay to dismiss me, that my needs were optional, that my presence was permanent, no matter how poorly I was treated. And now I sat in the ruins of that teaching, trying to remember when I last felt like a human being. A woman, not just a role. I whispered into the still air, "Who am I if I'm not needed?" But the room didn't answer. Liam didn't knock. He didn't check in. He didn't apologize. And a part of me realized he probably wouldn't. Because he didn't think he did anything wrong. That was the moment something shifted. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a quiet click inside my chest. Maybe I wasn't angry. Maybe I was done. That evening, I stepped outside just to breathe, just to prove to myself that I still could. The sun was going down behind the neighbor's roof, casting long golden lines across the sidewalk. I hadn't really looked at the sunset in weeks, maybe months. I had spent so much time hiding in my room, holding my breath, waiting for kindness that never came. But that day I noticed the light, and it felt like the first real thing I'd seen in a long time. I sat on the old bench in the front yard, the one I once painted blue when Liam was little. He used to sit there eating popsicles, feet swinging, asking me if clouds could fall. Now it sat peeling and forgotten, like most things I'd ever touched. For a while I just listened, to birds, to passing cars, not to Liam, who was inside with his headphones on again, laughing at something that didn't involve me. I began to realize something that shook me more than his words. He didn't hate me. He had simply stopped seeing me as a person. In his world, I was no longer mom. I was a resource, a routine, background noise. And whose fault was that? Mine. I had taught him that I would always say yes, that I would always pick up the pieces, that I would sacrifice without limits, without questions, without needing anything in return. I thought love was loyalty. But love without boundaries isn't love. It's self-destruction. I remembered a moment from years ago. Liam was maybe 10. He had just yelled at me in public, embarrassed by my old shoes. Later that night, he mumbled an apology. I smiled and said, "It's okay, sweetie, I don't mind." But I did mind. That night, I should have told him it hurt me, that words have weight, that even mothers bleed. Instead, I swallowed it, like I swallowed everything. And little by little, I disappeared. But now, the silence wasn't safety, it was suffocation. I reached into my pocket and felt my bank card, my name on it, my account, the one I stopped using because I let him manage the money while I focused on rest. Another lie I told myself to make his control sound like care. I got up and walked back inside. Liam didn't even look up. He was typing something, talking into a mic, probably another video about how parents hold you back. I stood in the hallway and looked at him, really looked, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity. This house wasn't mine, but my life still was. I didn't say a word. I just turned toward my room and closed the door behind me. Not to hide, but to begin making space. Space for questions like, what do I want? Where would I go if I weren't afraid? Who am I if I stop asking permission to breathe? That night, I didn't cry. I planned. For the first time in a long time. I started thinking like someone who mattered. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell or cry or write a long letter. I simply left. It happened quietly, almost like an afterthought. But to me, it was the loudest thing I had done in years. I woke up before the sun. The house was still, the kind of stillness that feels hollow, like even the walls had stopped listening. I moved slowly, but not nervously. There was no fear in my steps this time, only finality. I packed my old suitcase, the one with a cracked handle and rusted zipper. I hadn't touched it since my husband died. Back then, I packed it with sorrow. This time, I packed it with choice. Clothes, my ID and bank card. A few photos, not of Liam, but of me. Before I forgot who that woman was, I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out an envelope I had hidden years ago behind some thread and unused birthday cards. Emergency cash. I never knew what kind of emergency I was saving it for. Now I did. I left no note full of emotion or guilt. Just a piece of paper on the kitchen counter. I won't be here when you wake up. The house is clean. The fridge is full. Don't call. Mom. I didn't take the car. I didn't want to explain. I walked, slowly, steadily, down the block to the bus stop. It was barely 6 in the morning. The sky was painted with soft pinks and quiet blue. For the first time in years, I wasn't rushing. No one was waiting on me. No one would ask where I had been, no one would care, and somehow that brought peace instead of pain. I arrived at a small motel across town, not fancy, not even comfortable, but private. It smelled of cleaning fluid and old carpets, but it had a door I could lock and a bed that was mine. I sat on the edge of it, hands on my lap, and waited to feel regret. None came. Instead, I felt a strange calm, like something had been untied inside me. I looked around the room. Faded wallpaper, a flickering lamp, a mirror I hadn't seen myself in for years. And there I was, not just a mother, not a burden, not a problem to manage, just a woman, breathing, alone, but not lost. For lunch, I walked to the gas station across the street and bought a sandwich and a small coffee. I sat by the window and watched cars pass like waves. None of them were his. And that was okay. He wouldn't come looking for me. He wouldn't notice the absence immediately. And when he did, it would be too late. Because I wasn't disappearing, I was returning to the version of myself I had abandoned to become the version someone else demanded. That night, I slept with the window open. I didn't check my phone. I didn't think about groceries or laundry. I didn't wait for anyone to knock on the door. I simply existed. And for now, that was everything I needed. The first morning in the motel, I woke up before the alarm, not because I had something urgent to do, but because my body had forgotten how to sleep in safety. It was quiet, no footsteps, no doors slamming, no passive-aggressive silence pressing against the walls. Just quiet and me. I got dressed slowly, folding my clothes with care as if that small act could bring order to a life I had just stepped into. I made myself a cup of instant coffee with the little machine on the counter. It tasted terrible, but it was mine. I sat by the dusty window and stared out at the parking lot. A couple argued near their car. A man in a hoodie smoked a cigarette. The motel clerk fed a stray cat. Ordinary things, real things. For the first time in years, I wasn't managing someone else's chaos. I was simply observing the world outside of my survival. But freedom, I realized, comes with weight. No one was depending on me now. No one was waiting on me to cook, clean, cover bills. And that, strangely, made me feel untethered. I had spent so many years being needed, even if unappreciated. Without that, who was I? Still, I had to keep going. The motel wouldn't pay for itself. That afternoon, I walked into a small diner 2 blocks away. It had a faded "Help Wanted" sign taped to the window. I almost didn't go in. I hadn't filled out a job application in decades. I didn't even know if I could still be useful in the world, outside my son's shadow. But I pushed open the door anyway. The manager, Maria, looked at me with tired eyes but a kind smile. She didn't ask about my past. She asked if I could work the early shift, wash dishes, take out trash, wipe tables. I nodded, and just like that, I had a job. The pay was minimum wage. The uniform was too tight. The first shift left my back aching and my feet numb. But when I got paid at the end of the week, just cash in an envelope, handed with a smile, I nearly cried. It was the first money I had earned for myself in over 20 years. I used it to buy a small second-hand lamp and a little notepad. That night, I wrote something in it. You started over, you're still here, and you matter. Every day wasn't easy. The motel walls were thin, the nights were cold, and sometimes I caught myself missing Liam, not who he became, but the little boy he once was. But I didn't reach out, because I knew now, missing someone isn't a reason to return to a place that broke you. Instead, I stayed, worked, ate alone, read a book from the library for the first time in years. And in all that simplicity, something started to bloom inside me. Quietly, gently. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was peace. And peace, for someone like me, was the beginning of everything. Days passed, and then a week. No call, no message, no knock on the door. And strangely, I no longer waited for one. The first few mornings, I would still reach for my phone instinctively, expecting some sort of angry voicemail, some explosion of blame, but it never came. And in that silence, I found something unexpected: relief. Every day I woke before sunrise, made my instant coffee, and walked to the diner for the early shift. I washed dishes in the back, stocked napkins, scrubbed floors. No one knew who I was before, no one cared. And that anonymity was healing. I didn't have to be mom. I didn't have to be the woman who failed her son. I could just be Nora. Maria, my manager, started talking to me more. She offered me a warm muffin one morning and said, "You've got steady hands." It wasn't much, but it was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in a long time. At the library down the block, I signed up for a card under my full name. I hadn't used it in over 20 years. The librarian asked, "Have you lived here long?" And for the first time, I said, "I'm just getting started." I checked out 3 books that day, none about parenting, none about sacrifice, just stories. Stories of women who wandered and found something unexpected. I read them in the evenings by the little lamp I bought with my first paycheck. Each night, the quiet didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt earned. There was no one to tell me I was in the way, no one to ask where I was going or why I was home late, no one to measure my worth by what I did for them. It was just me, and that was enough. I began writing in the notebook every night, sometimes just a sentence, other times full pages. I am more than what I've given. I deserve to take up space. Love without respect is not love. The words didn't heal me instantly, but they reminded me that I existed, that I had thoughts and dreams and fears that weren't tied to anyone else's needs, and slowly I began to feel stronger. Not in a dramatic movie scene kind of way, but in the way that I could walk past mirrors without flinching, in the way I could breathe fully without bracing for judgment. One Sunday afternoon, I bought myself flowers from a roadside stand. Yellow daisies. They weren't for a birthday. They weren't for anyone's table but mine. The man selling them asked, "Special occasion?" I smiled and said, "Yes." Because it was. It was the day I realized I didn't need permission to feel alive. That night, I lit a candle, placed the daisies in a jar, and watched their reflection flicker in the window. I whispered to myself, "You're doing okay." And I meant it. For the first time in a long, long time, I wasn't surviving. I was living. It was a Sunday morning. I had just come home from the diner, changed into my softest sweater, and was about to sit down with a book when someone knocked on the door. A knock that didn't belong. Too loud, too familiar, too late. I opened the door, and there he was, Liam. He looked thinner, older, but somehow smaller too. His eyes darted around the hallway, like he wasn't sure if I'd slam the door in his face. I didn't, but I didn't invite him in either. "Hi, Mom," he said, voice barely above a whisper. I said nothing. I waited. He shifted from foot to foot, holding something in his hand, a backpack that looked half empty and worn. I've been looking for you," he said. "I didn't know you left. You didn't even say goodbye." A bitter laugh nearly escaped me. "Goodbye? He'd told me to die." "I thought you wanted me gone," I replied, calm but firm. He looked down. "I didn't mean that." "I know," I said, "but you said it anyway." He sighed, rubbing his forehead. Things haven't been good. Sarah left, took the car. I lost my job. The apartment's too expensive. I thought maybe I could stay with you for a while, just until I get back on my feet. I looked at him, this grown man who once fit in my arms like a miracle, who now stood in front of me, asking to come back, not out of love, but out of need. I don't have space, I said softly. He blinked. What do you mean? This place? I don't mean physically, I interrupted. I mean in my life, in my peace. I built this without you. He stared at me like I'd slapped him. You're my mom. I was your mother every day of your life, I said, voice steady. Even when you yelled, even when you spent what little I had, even when you looked at me like I was nothing. He opened his mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. I'm not punishing you, Liam. I'm protecting myself. He was quiet for a long moment. The weight of it hung in the air. Finally, he whispered, So that's it? No, I said. This isn't it. You're still my son. I'll still answer if you call. I'll still pray you get better, but I won't rescue you. He swallowed hard. I don't know what to do. I took a breath and gave him the words I had waited years to find. I can't live your life for you. He stood there, frozen, hurt, lost, and I wanted to hug him. God, I wanted to, but I didn't, because love without boundaries is just sacrifice, and I had nothing left to sacrifice. I hope you find your way, I said, and slowly closed the door. Not out of cruelty, but out of love for myself. Behind the door, I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. It hurt, of course it did, but for the first time, the pain didn't come with guilt. It came with clarity. Because sometimes being a mother means saying no, and meaning it. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birds. No shouting, no tension behind the walls. Just birdsong drifting through the window I had left open the night before. I stretched slowly in bed, letting my body take its time. The sun poured in softly, casting golden shapes on the old curtain. There was no rush, no obligation, just the quiet hum of a day that belonged to me. I got up, made a cup of tea, mint this time, not because someone asked for it, but because I wanted it. I placed it on the small table by the window, next to the vase of yellow daisies. They had begun to wilt, but I didn't throw them out. Even fading, they were beautiful. Outside, the world moved slowly. A man swept the sidewalk. A child chased her shadow. The diner across the street started clattering into motion, but I had the morning off. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel invisible in my own life. I was not a background character. I was not an afterthought. I was a woman drinking tea, reading a book, and sitting in the soft glow of morning light. On her own terms. Later, I walked to the second-hand shop. I bought a small ceramic pot and a bag of soil. Back in my room, I planted a tiny cutting I'd been growing in a water jar for weeks. I gave it a new home, watched its leaves stretch toward the light. And I realized I was doing the same. At the library, I returned the books I'd read and borrowed 2 more. The librarian smiled and said, "You've been reading a lot lately." I smiled back. "I'm catching up." I was. Catching up on all the years I had put myself last. Catching up on silence that wasn't heavy but healing. Catching up on mornings where I chose my own rhythm. Some nights were still lonely, but not empty. I had my notebook. I had my plants. I had my thoughts, my own, not borrowed or judged. And slowly the woman in the mirror began to look familiar again. She had lines around her eyes, gray in her hair, but she also had strength in her jaw, warmth in her smile. and a softness that came from surviving without hardening. I didn't need anyone's permission to feel proud of her. One evening, I went to the park. I sat on a bench with a thermos of tea and watched the sky change colors. An elderly couple walked past holding hands. A group of teens laughed as they tossed a frisbee, and I smiled, not with longing, but with contentment. Because I wasn't missing anything, I had chosen this life. And every small detail of it, the chipped cup, the quiet room, the unpaid flowers, was mine. Not given, not begged for, claimed. This wasn't the life I once dreamed of, but it was real and peaceful and enough. For once, no one could take it from me, because it wasn't built on someone else's approval. It was built on my own forgiveness, for the years I lost, and for the years I still had. 2 weeks after I last saw Liam, a letter arrived at the diner. Handwritten, no return address. Inside was a single page. "Mom, you were right. I'm trying. I don't expect you to fix anything. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Liam." No begging, no guilt, just words. Small, clumsy, but real. I read them twice, folded the paper gently, and tucked it into my notebook. Not because I was planning to forgive him completely, but because it meant he had started his own journey, and I had stayed true to mine. A few days later, I saw him again. He didn't show up desperate. He didn't ask for a place to sleep. He just stood at a respectful distance outside the diner as I ended my shift. "I got a job," he said, "part-time at the gas station." I nodded. "That's good. I don't know what I'm doing yet, but I know I can't expect you to carry me." I looked at him, not the boy I raised, but the man he was trying to become. "I hope you learn to carry yourself," I said, "and forgive yourself too." He looked down, then back up. "Will you ever come back?" I smiled, kindly but firmly. "No, not the way you mean. I'm not going back to being who I was." He didn't argue. He just nodded, slowly, like he understood. We said goodbye, no tears, no hugs, just two people learning how to respect each other's distance. That night, I wrote one last sentence in my notebook. "I still have value, even if I don't belong to anyone." I turned off the lamp and slept better than I had in years.